Welcome to Conversations on the Coast, San Francisco's premier author interview program. And today we have a kind of a special occasion. We have an author who's come here all the way from Australia, just to let you know how important we are. She has written her debut novel called Without a Backward Glance. Her name is Kate Veitch. Her publisher is Plume Books, and welcome aboard.
Thank you so much. Thank you for making me so welcome to San Francisco.
I am impressed with the fact that you are a debut novelist and you spend some of your time in Australia and they've got you touring the United States. That's impressive. That means faith, I hope.
Oh, yes. It does mean faith, and I must say the publishers of my novel here have been very committed to Without a Backward Glance. They really believe in this book, and no author could hope for anything more than that.
And it's a book really to get your belief going early on. It's a book that, in one sense, can be summed up very quickly, and they do a nice job of it, I think, in the press release, which reads in part, on a sweltering Christmas Eve, and you can only have that in Australia, in 1967, Rosemary McDonnell heads out the door with her suitcase, telling her 4 children she's going to pick up more lights for the Christmas tree. They watch by the window as she leaves in an unfamiliar car and does not return. That's the way this book opens, in a way.
That's right.
And to say that grabs you is to put it mildly. It's a very interesting start.
The prologue does seem to get readers' attention.
One of the first questions that I think would come to any reader when they realize that this is happening is why would a mother walk out on her 4 kids on, of all days, Christmas Eve? And there's a spot in the book where this is very well explained. "Listen," sang the warm male voice, tender and confident. "Who is that, Paul? Maybe George? Do you want to know a secret?" This is Roseanne in the kitchen listening to a Beatles song.
That's right.
"No," she thought emphatically, "and I don't want anyone to know mine." She leaned her weight on the big kitchen knife with blind efficiency, slicing through a huge piece of homegrown pumpkin. Beads of moisture formed on the slabs of freshly cut flesh. No one wanted to know their real secrets anyway, and not the really big ones. That getting married was like slamming a great big door and living forever in just one tiny room. That babies tore you from the bliss of unbroken sleep as ruthlessly as any torturer, and you never got back to that lovely place again. That raising children and running a household was mostly tedious donkey work. That the man you'd once found so thrilling became over the years so eye-wateringly boring, you could hardly bear for him to lay a hand on you in bed. She's really got cause to go.
She's not a happy camper, our Rosemary. She's not at all. She does her best at playing the role of wife and mother. She's only 30 and she has 4 young children, the youngest 6, the eldest 12. She was an English girl who got pregnant to an exotic Australian in grey, drab, post-war London and ran away with him to the land, as she saw it, of sunshine and plenty. What she didn't know was that life in the Melbourne suburbs, Melbourne, Australia, in the 1960s was an incredibly conservative, stultifying place for a woman of intelligence and ambition, as Rosemary is, and as my own mother was.
Yeah, and the fact of the matter is she never really gave any of that a thought because she was so desperate to get out of England at that time.
Oh, that's right. And let's face it, what impetuous teenager in love does give the future a thought, realistically? True. Forward thinking is not the hallmark of people in love, let alone teenagers in love.
There is a place much later in the novel when she's kind of thinking about her life and how she's lived it, and kind of gets the feeling that there were other times when she walked away without a backward glance.
Yes, she's not a very mature person, Rosemary. It takes her a long time to actually come to understand what the patterns of her life have been. People react very strongly to Rosemary. A lot of readers have hated her. I have a lot of sympathy for her. She's partly, in fact, a portrait of my own mother. Not that my own mother left, but she was bitterly unhappy.
Well, I think there are many, many mothers, who want to leave. I think that's maybe part of the process. I mean, things.
But it's a very hard thing to admit to.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. There are scenes in Without a Backward Glance that are so good, so compelling, we might even share a couple of them with you. Stay tuned.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at JimFosterCoc and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
Without a Backward Glance, that's the title of today's book. It's a debut novel by an Australian author, Kate Veitch, published by Plume Books, not Gloom, Plume. And there have been some nice things said about it. For example, book list. Similar to Ann Tyler, they write, in her wry affection for her characters, and to Anita Shreve in her aptitude for crafting compulsively readable plot lines. With its brisk pacing and compassionate take on human failing, this absorbing novel is sure to win many fans. Yeah, you are compassionate, because Rosemary, who starts out in the passage we just shared, as walking out on a family, and nobody wants to cheer that. But
every character in my novel is flawed. There is no one in the whole novel who doesn't have flaws, and yet none of them are without redeeming feature.
And interesting. They're all interesting, all of them with their flaws and their redeeming features. They're very, very interesting people. They're
as interesting as real people are, or at least I hope they are to the reader. And I must say, they continue to be interesting to me, even now. The book's been released in Australia for a couple of years, nearly 2 years, and it was a bestseller in Australia and in Germany
and in
as
Germany.
Well.
Interesting, yeah. Interesting.
And I still like these people. I like them a lot.
One of the people that you must like a lot is James. James, by chance, goes to England. Mm-hmm. Well, not by chance. He goes because of his art. And while he's there, he goes to a cocktail party, and a woman approaches him after he kind of blurts out the story that we just heard about being abandoned by his mother, and she comes up and says, "I think I know that woman," and calls him on the phone. And there's a point where he's on the phone with her. He dialed a number. A man answered. He had a Caribbean accent. James could hear him calling, "Rose, pick up the phone," sounding as though he was calling up a flight of stairs. And then she comes on and says, "Hello." And then you write, he could remember her voice. He had never thought of that. He knew her face only from photographs, but he had never thought about her voice. His eyes were fixed on the small vase crammed with white roses sitting on the desk beside the phone. And there was the big window and the brown Thames beyond. But he saw all this without seeing it, because his head was completely filled by that one word, "hello," in this voice that he knew, that he had always known, and didn't know he knew. "Mummy," he said, and the tears burst so violently from his eyes that splashed on the desk in a rain of fat drops, blurring the number he had written there on the little notepad right at his fingertips. That's great.
Oh, thank you.
That's great.
Would you like to know where I got that image from?
Sure.
When Princess Diana died, we watched her funeral on TV, and on her coffin was a tight little bunch, big fat bunch of white rosebuds with a card on it, clearly from one of her sons or both of her sons, that said, Mummy. And in all of that enormous fuss and bother over Diana's death and funeral, that was the single thing that moved me most, this fat bunch of rosebuds and the one word, Mummy. And so when I came to write that scene where he has his first contact with his mother, that was the image that came to me.
The fascinating part about that passage for me is your grasp of the fact that memory, which is such a powerful force in our lives, remembers various different kinds of sensibilities.
Yes, James is upset because he can't think of her face, yet he can remember her voice.
And immediately he's there, and he's back with her.
Yes, he's gone back almost 40 years to when he was a little child. He hasn't said the word mummy for nearly 40 years.
And then he says it.
Yes.
And, Now, at another point, they actually meet up at the place where she's living with her Jamaican husband. And she says, oh, James, I know it was wrong, wasn't it? It's not forgivable what I did. I know that. And James gets up, takes 2 steps toward the glass door. There was a storm coming at him. That's how it felt. He could actually see the emotions, not the anger. That was the main thing. It was all that pent-up longing, the years and years of yearning and pretending that he had never acknowledged until now, approaching him, reaching him, sweeping through. And that's fascinating, too. It wasn't anger that, was coming up. It was these other feelings.
The loss, the yearning, the more complicated and delicate emotions. Anger is a big blockbuster.
It is.
Yearning is subtle and pervasive.
One of your critics talks of the ebb and the flow of Without a Backward Glance. We will, too, after this.
You're listening to Conversations on the Coast with Jim Foster. Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at Jim Foster COC and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.
This is Jim Foster. It is Conversations on the Coast. Our guest today, all the way from Australia, Kate Veitch. You don't even look tired. It's wonderful.
Oh, yes. Jet flight. It's a miracle.
You're over the jet lag. The title of her debut novel is Without a Backward Glance. Her publisher is Plume Books. And Vogue Australia had this to say about the book. In part, warm and always honest, Veitch manages to capture the ebb and flow of sibling dynamics and illuminate the mixed bag of emotions that comes with family life. That ebb and flow of sibling dynamics and mixed bag of emotions, I in a certain sense, at a certain level, that's what this book is about. I mean, it's about a lot of other things, too. It's got fascinating plot lines all over the place. For example, why doesn't James share things right away, share the fact that he's, met Rose? That all has to do with the sibling relationships, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. And the fact is that this is a family who, for various reasons, but yes, largely stemming from the secrecy surrounding their mother's disappearance, they're a family who each has been accustomed and are now habituated to having secrets. Every single person in this family, without even being conscious of it, keeps secrets.
That's the amazing part. They're not conscious of it until her return is a possibility, and then stuff starts, falling out of the closet, so to speak. There's something else going on here. There's a character, Deborah. Deborah is the oldest of the children, and her secret, I think, is that she doesn't want to give up her role of taking care of things.
Absolutely spot on. Poor Deborah is under the illusion, as most control freaks are, that if they keep a tight grip on the reins, that if they run everything, then everything will run for the best. And it is an illusion. It's one that all control freaks have to learn. I speak from experience here.
Well, we don't want to go into that.
There's actually a bit of me in every one of these characters.
Aha.
Yeah. There's
Well, how much of you is in the character that I think I found myself loving the most, and that's Meredith.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Meredith. Oh, that's great that you love Meredith.
Meredith, who starts out, if you wanted to give her a quick description,
train wreck.
The untalented alcoholic member of the family.
And who turns out to be not only talented, but to have more insight and compassion than, in fact, any of her more apparently well-coordinated siblings. Meredith is one of those characters who, as a writer, as the author, surprised me. I didn't know that she was going to turn out like that. I thought she was a train wreck, and she insisted on showing me the complexity and depth of her personality. I've heard writers say this before, and I've always thought it was rubbish. I always thought, oh, come on, you are the author. You control the characters. You're in charge. Yeah. And I found out it's not always so, both with Meredith and with James's wife, Silver, who I thought was just a rich bitch. Mm-hmm. But she refused to be that. Yeah. I wrote the scenes with her as a rich bitch, and she said, no, I'm actually a much nicer person. and Meredith...
so she is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so she is.
The character that's probably most like me, actually, is none of the siblings. It's actually probably young Olivia, the granddaughter.
Aha. Okay. Too old for her age at every stage.
That's right.
There she is.
And with a deep commitment to gardening and to dogs.
Even untrainable dogs in this case.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the great things you do at the end of this book is give us a glossary.
Oh, yes.
So that we might understand certain terms that come up in the course of the book. They are Australian versions of English.
Well, yeah, it's Australian slang. My publishers wanted to change every single bit of slang in the book. I didn't actually think there was any slang in the book. I just wrote it. But then when I saw that, things like skiting they wanted to change that to bragging, and that sooky could become tearful, I got quite sooky myself, actually. I just couldn't do it.
Actually, you had a desire, if you wrote down or cleaned up, as it were, all the slang, the glossary would be 10 times as long. Mm-hmm. And then you say, no winging now, or I'll do my block.
No whinging. No whinging, or I'll do my block. Yeah, don't complain about the slang, or I'll get really, really mad.
Now, one of the things that's not in the glossary, you must tell us real quickly, completely gobsmacked.
Absolutely knocked out, amazed.
This book will absolutely
that was it. I was
knock you out
gobsmacked.
And get you amazed. It's called Without a Backward Glance. The author is Kate Veitch. This has been Conversations on the Coast, and I'm Jim Foster.
Now you can find this program on iTunes, SoundCloud, and all your favorite digital outlets. Follow the show on Twitter at Jim Foster COC and email jimfostercoc@gmail.com.